It is an honor to introduce our first session. This is the Underworld, Soil Biodiversity and Regenerative Farming.
Thank you. I am Darcey Howard, and I am so honored, actually, to be here representing the Regenerative Organic Alliance. It's, it's not every day that you get to spend time with people that are, I work remotely, so I don't even get to see my teammates in person, but that I get to spend time with people that are so close to the soil and so close to what's important. And so this is really exciting for me to be here. I'm going to go ahead and advance our slide here and talk about what we're going to be talking about. First, I wanted to just sort of share how I came here before I let Garett kind of take over and nerd out. I work in an organization that is about 16 agronomists and 2.5 marketing people. So I get to spend a lot of time with a lot of nerds, and I love all of them. But it's really funny, every once in a while, I was talking with Herb last night, and how, well, I'll say something specific to consumer purchase behavior, and all the nerds on screen kind of look at me and go, huh? But then they say something totally scientific, and I'm like, huh? So I love the fact that there is this exchange and this sort of symbiosis around what's important to not just our industry, but to those that are looking at from the outside in at our industry. The consumers, the other certifications. So it's really exciting for me to be able to lend my expertise from all of my years in marketing, mostly in CPG and in the organic space. I've worked with organic cotton, organic coffee, organic coconut milk, organic cocktails. I've worked with a lot of organic products, and for me now at this point, I get to lend my expertise and my perspective to an organization that is working towards creating a movement that is really truly putting a lot more into the earth than what we've been able to do in the past. So it's very exciting for me to be here. So I'm going to turn it over to Garett and let him nerd out for a bit.
All right, I think I got some big nerdy shoes to fill. Everybody's really set me up, so I got to go hard on this stuff. Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. This is Troon Vineyard. My name's Garett Long. I'm the Director of Agriculture. I arrived at Troon in August of 2021 and jumped right into my first wine harvest. I had been farming for about 12 years on 3 different properties that were certified biodynamic, and 2 of them also became regenerative organic certified. Troon Vineyard is about 100 acres total. Half of that is planted in grapevines. We grow 20 different varieties, several clones of many of them. We planted cider apples, a permaculture-style food forest, hayfield. We rotate sheep and chickens across the whole farm, and we make about 250 to 300 tons of finished compost every year. But before I go on to tell you any more about Troon, I wanted to do a quick little primer on soil science. So I'm going to ask today for some audience participation, ask you to raise your hand or shout some stuff out. So does anybody have a name for this? Just shout it out. A little louder. Soil aggregate, that's great. Clay, I hear clay, how about the colloid surface of clay particles? Great. Humus is another okay name for this. Hard to define what humus is. But throughout the 20th century, really the last 100 years, we started to understand humus and use this term very generally as something that you could grow and accumulate and bank and store in your soil as a stable product. It was a stable sort of end product. And now we think of it, and I want you guys to all think of it as a process, as this continuum that is, the dynamic outcome of microbial life interacting with minerals and with soil structure. So, when we apply compost or cover crops, we're not applying this stable form of soil organic matter. What we are doing is really engineering microbial ecosystems that determine how carbon flows and eventually, hopefully, persists. So we'll come back to this mess in just a little bit. But I want to talk about some of our practices. So by a show of hands, how many of you have applied compost at your operations? Most people in the room. That's awesome. We spend about $30,000 a year importing 1,000 yards of organic dairy manure That makes up about half of our compost. The rest of it is made up of leftover hay that we grow on the property. We compost that along with any landscape debris, biodynamic preparations, and of course, really importantly, every seed, skin, and stem from the winemaking process and the pumice goes back into our compost. As a biodynamic farm, we really seek to limit outside inputs. Like many of you, we strive for low inputs, and we really try to build soil fertility and health and resilience from within our own farming ecosystem. We've calculated, as Demeter, our biodynamic certifier, requires us to calculate the amount of and the source of nitrogen and phosphorus that we apply on our farm annually. And we've accounted or calculated that 96 to 99% of all of the N and P that we apply annually is from our own compost. So it gives you a clear picture that the effect of those concentrated imported fertilizers is really minimal and our use is minimal. And most experts really agree that from a one-time application, you can detect these visible impacts in soil health for about 5 to 7 years. Some people claim much longer from a one-time compost application. But compost really helps build soil structure, and that improved soil structure both helps improve infiltration of water as well as the water holding capacity. So like I said, compost engineers microbial ecology by fueling growth by microbial communities, increasing their diversity, and shifting these functional groups, whether we're talking about mycorrhizae or nitrogen-fixing bacteria or whatever it might be. These functional groups are impacted by the presence of compost. We inoculate our soils with compost, but we also feed the microbes that are present there and native, and we impact how they interact with each other. Compost leads to the formation of microbial necromass. That's a fancy term that just means dead microbes. And so, I want to go back to this image real quick and point out that although this is very, very small, this is kind of the atomic molecular level, a single bacteria might be even bigger than this whole image, but what is clearly missing from this image is biology, right? A 2021 publication, authors found that in croplands, microbial necromass makes up about 50% of soil organic matter. So let that sink in for a second. Literally half of what we think of as humus or soil organic matter is really just dead microbes. And across global ecosystems, from forests to grasslands to croplands, the numbers change slightly, but ultimately this publication determined that 15 to 80% of all soil organic matter is microbial, living or dead microbes. So hopefully I'm shining a light on the importance of these, unseen microscopic creatures that are below foot. And so when I was in grad school at UC Davis, I remember my advisor referring to this chemical warfare that microbes are all competing in this messy soil soup fed by the mineralogy, fed by the geology. They're releasing these nutrients. They're also competing for it. They're killing each other. They're releasing all of these organic acids out into the environment for many different purposes. And I remember my advisor saying that microbes are all just feeding on the bodies of their dead comrades. Kind of paints a clear picture.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, totally. Game of Thrones. Okay, cool. So that's what's happening in this little messy soil soup, and we can really impact that, as Chris was saying earlier, with our practices. So how many of you have sown cover crops? Any kind of cover crops? Again, most of the group. Cool. I was kind of expecting that. After Troon changed hands and ownership in 2017, and we concluded that all of the vines were infected with red blotch. We had a bunch of fungal trunk diseases from about 50 years of farming prior to that. A decision was made to replant all of the vineyard acres. We replanted 10 acres a year for those first 5 years and tried to aggressively rogue and replant more red blotch infected vines for a few years. We cover cropped in that first year in preparing the vineyard for development, just using a simple 3 species plow down mix. In the spring, we plowed that under, incorporated the green manure into the soil, and for the first year, we managed our vineyards fully clean cultivated. Moving on from that, we tried to move into a no-till system as quickly as possible. In the second year, we tend to seed a really diverse cover crop mix in the alleys of about 15 species. Those cover crops include, wildflowers, sheep forage, grasses, legumes, and lots of species that are designed to tolerate some amount of tractor passes. And currently at Troon, we till undervine only, so it leaves about 80% of the vineyard floor in no-till, and the rest of the farm, 100% of the farm, is all no-till. And our intent is to really keep a living root in the ground, as the NRCS and soil health advocates talk about. Wherever green plants are growing on the planet, in our oceans, on land, they're photosynthesizing. And it's pretty surprising. It was surprising to me to learn that about 50% on average, depends on the plant, depends on the community, but about half of the carbohydrates that are created through photosynthesis are intentionally just leaked out through the roots. And this sort of leakiness might feel wasteful until you really consider what the purpose of that plant, or the purpose of sharing those carbohydrates are. They're really creating this plant-soil microbe mutual synergy, right? Plants are excreting these sugary compounds, as well as lots of other tasty things from microbes, amino acids, more bigger complex signaling compounds. Plants are asking for particular nutrients they might be deficient in. Plants are feeding microbes these carbon sources so that they can use that as fuel for then microbes to then go out and break down the soil and the minerals around them, releasing those nutrients both to the microbes and in abundance back to the plant. That is the specific trade-off and mutualistic benefit that plants and microbes have developed over billions of years, millions.
Now you sound like Carl Sagan.
Yeah, I know. I had to go back anyway. Okay, so when we think about that plant-soil microbe symbiosis, what happens when we add animals? How many of you have integrated livestock or poultry into your vineyards? A handful, definitely less than compost and cover crops, but I admire those people who have integrated them. Sheep can be very destructive in vineyards and can be very challenging, as we've come to learn. And of those people, if you can put them back up again, of those people who have integrated animals, how many of you care for those animals year-round and keep them on your property? Just a handful, maybe 10 or so. That's awesome. So that's what we do at Troon as well. We have a small flock of sheep, small flock of chickens. And kind of the old paradigm of thinking about integrating sheep or integrating livestock in vineyards was about weed control, and it was about converting the biomass of your cover crops into nutrients, usually in the form of manure and urine. But again, I want you to think about this kind of changing paradigm, how we think about soil science, and think about grazing as a tool to really steer ecosystem processes. It's not just about removing forage. It's about this targeted disturbance that is grazing. Plants are kind of balanced above ground and below ground, and when sheep come through and graze the top part of the portion, plants will just slough off. They give up their roots to the microorganisms for that mutualistic dance that I was talking about earlier, giving them carbon to fuel the breakdown of minerals and release those nutrients back to plants. So plants, reallocate carbon from their shoots to their roots, ultimately to exudates, to help stimulate their regrowth. And I think additionally, I just love this image too, that these hooved animals like sheep will walk through a vineyard and leave indentations. They literally stamp and plant seeds in the ground as they walk, and those little indentations are then repositories for water to fill and infiltrate into the soil rather than run off. So the impacts of grazing animals and integrating them in vineyards can be really, really positive if done right, done effectively. Biodiversity, another show of hands. How many have insectary plantings, hedgerows, pollinator gardens, within, without, or inside or outside of the vineyard? Again, a pretty good number of you. At Troon in 2020, we established a native demonstration garden. It's about 90 species of Southern Oregon native plants. Pollinator gardens, flowering cover crops. We intentionally invite in wildlife into the farm. Demeter has the requirement that a minimum of 10% of your total acreage be dedicated to biodiversity reserves. Very similar, and I really appreciated what Chris was talking about, the importance of including biodiversity. We're blessed to have a fully fenced property at Troon. 100 acres with a fence around it keeps the deer and the bears out, but selectively invites in animals that we want to participate in our farming. So, western bluebirds will eat a family of bluebirds will eat literally thousands and thousands of insects in a year. That helps us reduce pest populations and reduce our reliance on pesticides. Barn owls, I love this. We attract raptors by installing hunting perches, kestrel boxes, and we have 16 barn owl boxes at Troon on 100 acres. A family of barn owls will consume 1,000 to 3,000 rodents a year. So you can imagine the amount of gopher and vole control that are provided just by one family. If we've got 16 boxes inhabited, that's a lot of really soul-sucking gopher trapping work that we don't have to do. And we're feeding wildlife that participates willingly in our farm. And lastly, because ultimately wine is the product that we're trying to make, I want to talk about fermentation and our winemaking approach. As a biodynamic certified farm and vineyard, there's also a separate biodynamic winemaking standard and a set of standards for our winery that is really strict and requires this low intervention winemaking approach. So we add 0 sulfur at crush. We really hold sacred good hygiene in the winery. We never inoculate with commercial yeasts. Our biodynamic certification doesn't allow for that. And we allow for the spontaneous fermentation in open-top fermenters outside the winery. That's our approach, is using native yeasts. And farming in these ways that I'm describing really allows us to then approach winemaking and spontaneous ferments in this way, with fewer inputs, fewer manipulations in the cellar, and begs the question, why? Why do we do it this way? Why do we feel, and why does Demeter feel like this is a superior way of making wine? Well, as Chris shared, kind of took my punchline earlier, but we've had conversations about this. It might be the reason why I'm here, is to share some publications with you. More and more, there are publications online or available in scientific journals discussing the direct relationship between microbial communities and terroir, or what we think of as a sense of place or this regional distinctiveness. And terroir, which is this French term, has always been thought about as a relationship between soil, climate, and some kind of human or cultural interactions, right? Especially if we're thinking about vineyards and the way that a sense of place is perceived in a glass of wine. And ultimately, that's true, but all of those things, soil types, your geology, how long your soils have been developing, what plant communities are there, and yes, your cultural practices, absolutely the climate, the rainfall, all of these select for particular microbial communities that are living on the grape skins, that are responsible for spontaneous fermentation. And more research is being delivered every year to discuss how important microbial community is in actually presenting what we understand of as regional distinctiveness. So that's why we make wine in that way. I'm going to kind of close and hand it over to Darcey to talk about the regenerative organic certification, but I wanted to share this image that Rudolf Steiner, who was responsible for founding biodynamics, thinks about the plant as sort of a human upside down, where the parts that we eat with are the plant leaves facing up towards the sun, the reproductive bits are facing up, and then the sensing or maybe thinking part of the plant are the roots, and that happens below ground, where it's sensing its community, interacting with by secreting these exudates and mutually supporting each other. I think it just kind of gives life and sort of gives intelligence to plants. That is this really cutting edge research topic. And as we begin to understand more about how plants sense and interact with the world without any sort of movement or motility, I think it's been inspiring for me to think about them just sort of sensing the soil. And anyway, I like this image. So I'm going to close on this one about just talking about relationships. If we're thinking about this continuum of how we can impact soil health, how carbon in the soil is constantly flowing, being exchanged between microbes, released out into the soil soup, absorbed by plants, stabilized deeper in the soil profile. All of these relationships ultimately build towards resilience against pathogens and disease, invites in wildlife to help us take care of pests, and it's the reason why we farm in this way. And I became a father about 1.5 years ago, and as I walk through the farm and we listen to the bird songs, and there's no plastic trash strewn about the vineyard, I'm really thinking about raising my son in an environment that's really healthy. And the reason why I farm, like the world depends on it, which is the slogan of the Regenerative Organic Alliance, is because I feel like for the sake of my son, it does matter to farm this way. So I'm going to pass it to Darcey to keep going.
Thank you. What a great segue. And, we were recently on a 28-acre regenerative organic certified farm in San Juan Capistrano doing an event where I got to moderate a panel inside of a geodesic dome in my socks. And it was one of the coolest panels I ever got to moderate because it was a group of women. We called it the Women of Rock. And the founder of that farm said, as one of his opening lines, he talked about, let's do something our kids would be proud of and something that means a lot to them. So I love that Garett shared that. And you are actually going to hear from him again. So, your applause are greatly appreciated, but you get to do it again soon. So we're going to kind of ping pong back and forth. So with this, I want to just talk about, because I don't want to assume that everybody here is familiar with the Regenerative Organic Alliance, and I want to just sort of share how it came to fruition. In 2017, a group of leaders within the organic movement, Rodale Institute, Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, came together and decided that there needed to be something more to this, that there was an aspirational standard that needed to be developed, and that it needed to guide the future. And so they created the Regenerative Organic Alliance and the standards that support it. Those are built on 3 pillars: soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness. And they require going above and beyond organic, which organic already is really difficult to establish, and then to add these 3 pillars onto it and go one step further. But I think that there's a lot in the consumer's eyes, and this is where I come from a lot, is in the consumer's eyes, organic has started to lose some of its weight. There's a lot of greenwashing out there, and though we don't want to create certification fatigue, we do want to be able to create trust levers. And those 3 pillars are trust levers for a lot of consumers. So the ROA is constantly, continuously reviewing our standards. And part of reviewing our standards is to make sure that we are in a state of continuous improvement, much as the farms that we support, and also the brands that we support. So in the idea of continuous improvement, we also have the journey to rock, so helping farms and meeting them where they are to help bring them along, which is also important to us. The thing that I get asked often is, what is the difference? There's regenerative, there's organic, there's regenerative organic certified. So I wanted to just bring this up and touch on it just briefly, in that there is, and I talk about the fatigue of certifications, and there is a regenerative, a lot of you actually, I would say, are probably farming in a regenerative way. We sort of just touched on that when you raised your hand multiple times. A lot of you are farming in a regenerative way. There are some certifications that are just focused on regenerative, but they don't include organic. And as we know, organic, prohibits most synthetic chemicals, prohibits GMOs. Regenerative Organic Certified is this all-encompassing. It includes fair trade, it includes organic, it includes non-GMO. It's very all-encompassing. And so it is seen by most retailers and by most farmers as the highest standard. It's not easy to obtain. And we were talking last night about this, and I had the real pleasure of spending time with Pam and Rob at Amber Estate yesterday. And we were talking about how it's a little punk. Like we're going against the grain. We're working really hard. Things that are not easy to do are always a little on the fringe. And so sometimes as you're having conversations with people about Regenerative Organic Certified, you get this sense that you're kind of a little punk at this moment, and that's okay. It's hard, but it's also a lot of fun. And the results and what we're doing as we look at the UN Climate Council last year at Climate Week announced that there are 60 crop rotations left on this earth before the earth ceases to relinquish any more nutrients. And what consumers are most concerned about are nutrient density. I mean, I hate to tell you this, but most consumers aren't laying awake at night worrying about soil health. I wish they were, but they're not. They're worried about what they're putting in their body, what they're feeding their family, but they're also worried about taste. And as we were just discussing, there's nothing more terroir than what's going on in your soil. So soil health, animal welfare, social fairness, what does that mean? I just wanted to bring up our 3 pillars, but also that organic is at our foundation. When you hear regenerative, and the USDA this past couple months ago, this past year, right around December, announced that it was going to put up $700 million towards regenerative farming practices for farmers. It did not include organic. We, of course, applaud that because, hey, any step forward is good. But we also said, hey, let us help you make that a very successful program by including organic to it. And, obviously putting in social fairness, animal welfare, we really want to see that be a real success in what that money is going towards. Where we are today, what I love about this slide and the next slide is that as soon as I put it up, it's out of date because we're growing that fast. This is just a snapshot of kind of where we ended in 2025 with the number of acres, 61,000 farms and smallholders, nearly 600 types of crops that are regenerative organic certified, and we saw an increase in sales of regenerative organic certified products. I'm going to talk a little bit later. I'm going to get marketing nerdy with you, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those numbers. But first, I just wanted to talk about, this is the slide that we share most often. When I look at the 337 brands, last year alone, we grew 62% in the number of brands that are regenerative organic certified. And yes, compared to, say, the USDA organic certification, these are small numbers. But again, we started in 2017. So we're growing considerably. And I think that a lot of that has to do with how people are viewing their farming practices, but how they're viewing their contribution to putting nutrients back into the earth. Also, again, I'm going to go into this when I get marketing nerdy. Also, sort of what the trust levers are that consumers are looking for and how brands are going to differentiate themselves. And that, I'm going to turn it back over to our most approachable and adorable nerd.
Nerds. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through some of the history of how we achieved certification at Troon and some of our soil test results as well. So Troon's a little more than 50 years old. It was established by Dick Troon. In 72, he planted the vineyards, and that year he also hung this sign in this photo, ambitiously saying that he would be producing wines 4 years from then. In 2011, we became live certified. Big thanks to Herb Quaddy and his illustrious history at Troon that helped us become live certified and take the first step toward where we are today. I mentioned in 2017 there was a change of ownership. And under the stewardship of Craig Camp, our general manager, who was also nominated for a Wine Enthusiast Wine Star Award Environmental Advocate of the Year, started steering the farm in 2018 toward using biodynamic practices. And we were able to achieve both our organic certification through CCOF and our Demeter biodynamic certification 3 seasons later in 2020. A year later, we achieved ROC certification, and then in 2023, we obtained an outside certification through the Equitable Food Initiative that allowed us to achieve the gold level of ROC. And one of my biggest recommendations for how I have been inspired to do what I'm doing, how Troon has been able to achieve what we've been able to achieve, is really just through mentorship. That could be a consultant that you pay. It could be, hopefully for many of us young people in the room, a mentor who is willing to spend time and energy and share their wisdom with you. I was very blessed in my first couple of years of farming at Apricot Lane Farms. If you guys saw the documentary The Biggest Little Farm that came out a few years ago, That's where I started a work trade, a WOOF work trade in 2012. And we were very blessed to have two consultants, Matthias and Alan York, teach us about biodynamics and prep making. And Andrew Beatty was our garden and orchard manager at Troon. He has gone on to consult and is now our consultant at Troon and continues to be a very, very close friend and mentor of mine, and the first person I turn to when I have questions about biodynamics and about holistic farming in general. So I wanted to just ask for one last show of hands in the room. How many of you, especially the elders in the room, are willing to mentor young people in this room? So if you guys are looking around and feeling a little stuck or feeling like you're super passionate and you just don't know where to turn to, hopefully you noticed a few people raising their hands, and maybe you can strike up a conversation with them later today. Okay, I'm going to talk about this soil health study. When the farm changed ownership, we hired an outfit out of Napa to come down and dig 75 backhoe pits, characterize the soil all the way down to more than a meter deep, looked at some serious J-rooting problems, some planting issues, and then 4 years later, when my first spring on the farm came out, and we revisited 16 of those sites, dug some deep backhoe pits, took samples from the top 8 inches, 8 to 18 inches, and 18 to 36 inches. Those soil depths were determined by our soil types on our property. They might be different for you, but we looked at 3 different horizons of soil, and those same 16 locations that were visited 4 years prior. I really wish this meeting was like a couple months from now, because we're gonna revisit this again and say 8 years in, but going back to June of 2022, here's some of our results. We found that soil organic matter increased in every single sample, top horizon, middle, and deep subsoil, every single sample except for 2 of them that are shown here, where we saw just the tiniest little decrease in SOM in the surface, but you can see in the lower soil profiles, the green and the gray bars, how much we increased. I should probably explain these figures a little bit. These are, in 2018 and 2022, side-by-side comparisons of those samples I was just talking about, pulled by Napa Soil Technologies, and then by me in 2022. The blue bar up top represents that 0 to 8, that surface level that's changing so quickly in our agricultural systems. And then the 8 to 18 inches and the deeper subsoil are really where we saw the most profound increases in soil organic matter in those first 4 years. Here's a couple of different soil types, a gravelly silt loam and just a straight up loam, where we again saw just incredible increases in SOM in every single soil sample 4 years later. We also saw the same trends in non-vineyard areas, in a pasture, in our vegetable garden, in our apple orchard, and we saw the same trends of just really, I mean, you can see this 0.5% up to more than 2% in that lower horizon. This is really supported by academic literature these days that suggests that perennial systems, no-till systems, applying compost, integrating animals, maximizing biodiversity, what you expect to see is an accumulation of carbon, especially at depth. It's hard to build carbon in that topsoil that's especially getting so interacted with by microbes and plants and tillage implements and sprays and feet and tractors and all of that. So, but again, at depth, we're really accumulating a lot of carbon. And why does it matter? I think about water. We're here in the Pacific Northwest, and where we're at in the Siskiyou Mountains is much more like Northern California climate. They say we get 31 inches on average a year of rain, but we've gotten 17, 19 or so the last couple of years that I've been there. Every 1% increase in soil organic matter helps your soil profile hold 20,000 gallons or more, give or take, per acre. So, you know, if we go back just real quick and you think about that 1.5% increase in the surface, more than 1% increase in the anyway, lots of percents of increases of organic matter throughout our profile is just helping our farm hold millions and millions and millions of gallons of water, and that in every critical rainfall event that we get, our soil becomes this sponge to hold that water and make it available throughout the growing season. That's it from the nerdiness. I'd love to keep chatting with you guys later, but I'm going to step aside and let Darcey nerd out.
Well, thank you. I'm going to continue with the percentage theme, but I did want to talk about what some of the the barriers to becoming regenerative organic certified. That some of them are a little more perceived, some of them, not as much. We see that there is, that J curve. And one of the things that, I was down in California and I was at Stag's Leap and listening to them talk about their journey to rock and how their vineyard manager said that basically he started because his son had health issues and they were trying everything and they finally started turning to what they were feeding his son. And they went organic, then they went regenerative organic and saw improvements in his health. So then the whole family got on board with that. And suddenly he was like, wait a minute, we're eating this way, but I'm not farming this way. And against the sort of wishes or permission of the owners of Stag's Leap, he started going block by block and started doing regenerative organic certified farming. And what he saw was not that it cost more or that it took more labor, but the soil stability. They were doing less irrigation. They were having to use less labor. And so their J curve went really quickly. And that's sort of just an analogy that I wanted to create around some of those barriers that we think of when we think of getting certified or moving our practices into a different format. This is a snapshot from the Nielsen IQ, and like I said, I'm going to get like marketing nerdy. I'm going to start talking about consumers. And what was really fun last night when I was talking to Herb, he said that he'd been starting to try and nerd out on marketing because that was something that was new to him. And I asked him, what are you enjoying about that, or what do you find challenging about that? And I think that, what's enjoyable about looking at how consumers are experiencing our brands, your individual brands, thinking about what that looks like and what that feels like for consumers can give you a real perspective. It's like that outside looking in. It can give you a real perspective on what's important to them and how does that become important to you. This is a snapshot looking at what the progression of things that are important to consumers. And as you see those blue dots, there's the color coding up above. But what I thought was really interesting is as you look to the far right of that animal welfare starts to pull up further and further and further, and social responsibility takes a bigger step out there. And so what we're seeing is that the importance to consumers and how we're indexing with consumers and what's important to them. Going back to those 3 pillars, talking about that, when we look at who our consumer index is for Regenerative Organic Certified, it aligns very closely. I was having this conversation with Pam and Rob yesterday. It aligns very closely with what I think most of your consumers are, in that 24 to 45 range. And what's interesting is within that range, they're each sort of approaching Regenerative Organic Certified for a different pillar. When I said that consumers aren't laying awake at night worrying about soil health, I'll tell you what they are laying awake at night worrying about. They're worrying about nutrient density. Now, does nutrient density necessarily apply to wine? Not really. But what they are also looking at is flavor profiles. The other piece that I really wanted to share with you about consumers right now and their purchase behavior is one particular consumer that I've been doing a lot of research on, and that's the GLP-1 consumer. So GLP-1 consumers are being guided through their process to make sure that they are eating more nutrient-dense, fiber-rich, more protein, smaller portions, and more frequently. That doesn't mean that they are completely eschewing things that feel like a treat, such as chocolate or wine. Oh, they're very much treating themselves, but let me tell you, they are doing it with the best that they can possibly get. So if you're going, and I believe that Rob said this yesterday, it was something to the degree if you're going to eat less, eat best. So if we're looking at how that consumer is purchasing right now, Regenerative Organic Certified fits right into what they're looking to acquire. And that is what is attributing to the fact that 22% growth that we saw in the past year of Regenerative Organic Certified products, like that particular certification is growing faster than the other certifications right now. Yes, because it's new. I mean, I will admit, the organic certification has been around a while. Is it going to grow at the same rate that it did maybe 20 years ago? No, probably not. But the regenerative organic certification right now is growing at 22%. What's also really interesting is that it is when paired with another certification, we see quite an increase. Why is that? Trust levers. I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but the trust levers that consumers are looking for when they're purchasing. And going back to those 3 pillars and our sort of demographic that are searching for regenerative organic certified products, they're looking for something that they can trust. And whether that be for a younger consumer, they're looking at the animal welfare pillar. And maybe that mid-range parents or the mom shopper, they're looking at that soil health because it contributes to nutrient density. And then the more mature consumer is looking at that social fairness. So it's not just a certification, and it's not just a consumer. It is basically 3 different consumers within one sector of individuals, and they're looking at all of these things combined. So it creates this trust lever that consumers can look to for what they're needing, what they're wanting for their own families. But again, going back to that nutrient density and flavor, there is a region, the Paso Robles region right now is looking to become all regenerative organic certified. They basically, started with a couple of regenerative organic certified wineries that have gone out to the others and said, listen, we have an opportunity here to become truly unique and a destination. Let's do this together. So at the end of this month, they're going to be having a media event there and bringing in media. What a great opportunity. What a story to tell. One of the things that we were talking about yesterday is that consumers assume or automatically look for what story is behind this wine. Again, they're not looking for the nutrient density of their wine, but they're looking for flavor and they're looking for story. What story is this going to tell? I love the story that Regenerative Organic Certified tells of the wines that have that certification, and even the live certification. One of the things that Regenerative Organic Certified is doing is bringing together other certifications so that we're all working on this together. We each have a role to play. And to use an analogy that I 99% of the time get wrong, but I'm going to get it right this time, is high tide raises all boats. I always say,
Nailed it.
I cannot tell you how many times I've said, lots of boats raise the tide, but that's only in a bathtub. So let's see if I can get this right. Anyhow, so the goal that we have as an organization is to transition 10 million acres to regenerative organic certification by 2030. That's a big goal. That's a lot. But we're getting there, and we're getting there 1 acre at a time. And we're getting there by this, the demand. So what we always joke about, we actually did at our event recently, we had a bingo card, a networking bingo card, and we're like, how many times did our CEO, Christopher Gergen, say flywheel? We use this flywheel a lot. And we use it to illustrate how are we all getting there together. If you think about how are we going to grow demand, it's not that the regenerative organic certification, the ROA, is going to leapfrog over and start talking to consumers directly. Consumers directly spoken to about this are going to go, wait, what? Who are you? But we are what I would refer to as a B2B to C. We work with the brands that are certified to help them to find the ingredients that they're looking for that are regenerative organic certified from producers. Then we work with those producers to get long-term commitments from brands, but the key role that is in there is the retailer. So when I came on board in August, I was like, okay, let's see. We started out talking to farms, now we're talking to brands. If we're going to get to consumers, we really need to engage retailers. Retailers have a really big role to play in this, and they also have a big responsibility to create clear, consistent, and concise messaging across all channels so that they can create something that consumers can understand no matter where they are about what this is. So getting long-term commitments with retailers, then committing to regenerative organic certified products on shelf, then committing to long-term commitments for farmers. So, breaking down those barriers, we're here to help with grow market access to commitments, expand technical assistance and training, like mentors, enhance shared learning, and data collection. We're basically rocking it in the wine industry, and we want to do more. And we're here to help with that, whether you're already organic or you're on a journey towards that. We're here to help with that. So, in closing, I just wanted to say thank you to Live for letting us be here, for letting us be part of this conversation. We're extremely appreciative, and I also wanted to just thank Garett for being really fun to collaborate with. It's been really great. Thank you.